Repeak. Imagine peeking. What a poor guy flashing and then peeking. I just guessed he'd pop out then. He's like over here somewhere, isn't he? He'll come up here then. Nice. Nice.
Hello everybody, Azure Trace here, and welcome to another Accessibility Awards video. This one will be for CSGO. Now the last video I did one on Valorant, and I realized, first off I did it at 5 AM, and I realized it was a bit unclear and a bit janky in places. So I've decided to revamp the style I do it and the format I do it in to perhaps allow for some better visual clarity here and there. I would also like to very quickly thank PC Gamer for highlighting it in the forums. That was very lovely of them. In their weekly roundup, which you're seeing a picture of right now, they showed it off. That's nice of them. I didn't expect that when I made the video, and it was a little rough around the edges when I made that video, but it was nice. Now, onto the format. That will be changing into a 3-section format. One for hearing and audio stuff, one for visual and eye stuff, and one for the motor skills portion. Now what I mean is, one will be focused on my half deafness and how that affects me for the current game of whatever I'm talking about. One will be focusing on my cornea scarring and how that blindness affects me. It's not true blindness because I can still see, it's just everything's a bit blurry. And motor skills will encompass how I move my fingers in a particular game that I'm playing. So you may hear a bit of repeated information from game to game, as some do have very similar problems and or good solutions. To start off with, let's talk about the hearing and the audio design of CSGO in terms of my disability. First off, deafness is always a problem in first-person games, especially in competitive first-person games, because you sort of need to know your left and right. So right off the bat, that's a problem that all FPSs have a problem with. It's okay, I work around it. It's how the game goes about the sound design that really tells whether I'm going to enjoy it or not. In Valorant's case, I highlighted that they do a particularly good job of giving audio clarity through way of map environment. What I mean is, when footsteps are done in Valorant, they split the map into sections such that if you're moving around on the map, I will be able to tell you're moving around because of the noise the texture of the ground makes. If it's metal, it's very clearly that you're on the metal section of the map. If it's wood, it's very clear. This is not the case for CSGO, where yes, there are different sounds for different textures, but it's not clear. It's not done as well as Valorant's. Valorant's, you hit the metal once and it's like a clang. You hit the metal once in CSGO and it takes my brain a couple seconds to realize that it's changed from metal, because they're also muted. It's a skill rather than immediately something that's obvious. And I prefer, honestly, Valorant's system of just making it a level playing field by not making it something you have to implicitly listen out for, the subtle changes. It's way easier for me to place where people are without having the 3D orientation that people have by having 2 ears, because of the noise the sound makes. So having that implicitly be a part of Valorant is very useful. Now, if we're talking about the clarity of the guns and stuff, like Valorant, CSGO has very good sound design in terms of the guns. Each shot is distinct. An AWP is never going to be confused for an AK. An AK may be confused for an M4 at times, but an assault rifle essentially is an assault rifle. The deagle makes a nice loud noise. Dualies are similarly the same. You can tell the difference between an AWP shot and a Skitchumit shot because they're both quite clear. Now, that's the hearing and audio out of the way. Let's get on to the visual and eye section. Again, clarity CSGO suffers from it, but it's more because it's a byproduct of the game that it's trying to be. You see, unlike Valorant, CSGO is more heavily vested in the semi-realistic setting that it's going for. That means player models don't pop out, player models sort of are in tune with the map they're on, map design is muted, it's meant to be grounded in some sort of reality, which means, unfortunately, the byproduct of that is things can blend in. Boxes can be confused with humans. Round shaped stuff can be confused with body parts. With especially with my eyes, if we're looking here at long dust A, I constantly don't see people in between those barrels and stuff like that because it is not immediately clear to me how to distinguish the shapes at a long distance. My eyes just cannot do it. Whereas in Valorant, they're fluorescent pink. I'm not going to confuse anybody for anything else because they are fluorescent pink against what is mostly a muted color palette. But with CSGO's recent armor update and the way they do their lighting passes and stuff like that, stuff does blend in. So that's a mark against them. Honestly, it's a disability mark against them, not a game design mark against them, as the art style is fantastic. And the way they've done the map design is also fantastic, and the way they have lit it up to allow for people with no disability to see clearly. It's just not taking that extra step to make it accessible. However, unfortunately, I must concede this point because it is in the type of game it's trying to be. I don't expect them to change because that would ruin what CSGO is trying to be. I don't expect it to be a Valorant. It's just that's a mark against it in the disability front. However, if I was to highlight some good things, crosshairs can now be interchanged in the game easily, and as always, crosshairs were always really easy to see, and you can change them to whatever you want to be, and now you can even set them to any other players in the game quite easily. And map clarity in terms of the mini-map, the HUD, is also very clear. Like, as you can see, it's a very basic map. It's easy to understand where the boundaries of the map are, where boxes are, stuff like that. It doesn't give as much information as the Valorant one, but it's clear, concise, neat, it's useful. It does what an overlay of a map should do. So, positives there. Again, not as much information given as Valorant's, but that's neither here nor there. New information is useful, but it's not totally needed, and it's in sticking with what CS wants to be in terms of a competitive shooter. If we take all the competitive aspects away from CSGO, there's not much left. It's nice that Valorant has simplified a lot of things, but I understand why CS does what it does, so I'm not marking that against it. It's not a disability issue, it's more just a part of the game it wants to be. Finally, the motor skills section. This will be where I talk about how the disability that I have affects each individual game. FPSs will share a lot of similar things, but in this case, because I only use two fingers on the keyboard, I only use my first finger on W, and thumb does A, S, D, Z, X, C, and space. Which equates to basically first finger on W for movement, A, S, and D for movement, all done with the thumb, Z for talking to the team, X for walking, C for crouch, and space for jump, obviously. Which means if I want to strafe while walking, I have to bring my finger down to A and D and S or W, and have my thumb on X, which means I cannot talk to my team while I'm strafing. That's just a limitation of my hands. Crouching as well cannot be done easily. Again, that's just another limitation and byproduct of what I have to do. It's not a mark against CS. There's no real easy way to keybind this in, and it's the same for most FPSs. That's simply how I do it. If I want to crouch jump, I have to use my first finger on W, run forward, press space, take my hand off W, first finger onto crouch, or move my thumb from space to crouch, or first finger down to crouch. And then if I'm going to strafe in the air, I have to move my first finger away from the W key down to A or D and bring my thumb up to C. So that's how that's done. This is how it affects me in the game world. On the right hand, mouse movement's the same. It's left click for shooting, right click for scopes, and that's it. Middle mouse button doesn't do anything apart from change weapon. But you'll note that I don't use 1, 2, 3, or 4 for changing weapons because those can be accidentally clicked. Finally, I'd like to talk about the settings available on the main menu, As you can see here, they're pretty standard stuff. The audio doesn't have anything accessibility-wise, but key bindings are all available, the crosshair settings are all available. Everything that you'd ever want in an FPS is available here. It's just there's not much in the ways of accessibility. However, I should mention that hit markers do exist in the game. It's just that there's no way to change what they look like or anything like that. Still, overall, a pretty good game. I mean, accessibility-wise, it was never going to be the highest because it's very hard to make a competitive shooter accessible without getting non-disabled people an advantage. But overall, a pretty good job. I give this about a average 6-7 out of 10 because again, but that's more of a caveat to the type of game it is.